Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our education reimbursement program update. We're going to just give it a couple more minutes. We had a few more attendees that had registered, so we'll just wait for a couple more minutes until till 2 after, and then we'll get started just to see if we can capture a couple more folks trickling in. I will. I'm just going to mute and go off camera here for just 1 minute while we wait. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started here. Welcome to the Education Reimbursement Program update for education programs. We're using the webinar feature in Teams today, so that limits chat and your ability to use your camera and microphone. So if you have any questions, there should be a Q&A panel in your Teams interface that you can click on and open up the Q&A interface. We'll be monitoring that for any questions along the way. So feel free to type in the Q&A chat. We're also recording this meeting just for your awareness. It will be posted to our website, so you can review any of the information later, or if you'd like to share the video with anyone else, we'll have a link to it posted on our website. All right. I'm Charles Souchere, Deputy Director of Ambulance Services. I'll be presenting today along with Holly Jacobs, one of the OEMS specialists. All right. Our agenda for today, we're going to review the changes to the education reimbursement program. This is what we used to call the volunteer education reimbursement program. We still may refer to that as that from time to time, but as you'll hear in our update, it's no longer restricted to just volunteers, and so we'll cover that. We're going to talk about the e-license portal information that you'll need to be updating along with that new program. Receipt information and requirements that you'll need to provide back to ambulance services so that they can take advantage of the program. And then we'll touch on a couple of other important reminders, have time for questions, and then we'll wrap it up. All right. So what has changed with the education reimbursement overview? So typically this was restricted to, excuse me. This had a restriction. This had, I'm just going to talk about the changes. So the new ambulance services that qualify are going to be any ambulance service that goes on 5,000 or fewer calls a year. They qualify to get reimbursed for their tuition education. Holly, can you just give me a jump in here for a second?
So Minnesota licensed ambulance services who respond to 5,000 calls a year or less essentially qualify for education at the EMR and EMT level. Before that was those who fit the definition of an ambulance service volunteer. The EMR education reimbursement is something that is new to the state of Minnesota. So ambulance services who have EMRs on their ambulance service, they do not qualify for education that was received prior to July 1st of 2025, but for initial and refresher courses that were completed after July 1st of 2025, they are eligible for reimbursement if those EMRs are rostered on their ambulance service.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
You good?
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
I advanced the slide for you. Yep.
Okay, so as required in statute, so Minnesota approved EMS education programs must register their courses with the Office of EMS prior to the start of a course. That hasn't changed. Courses are approved by our office, and then you are assigned a course number. Course numbers contain the year the course was approved, so 2025 for courses this year, obviously 2026 for next year, the education program number, that's your approval number, and an additional 5-digit unique identifier. That identifier is going to be what you want to use to identify what course is associated with a particular, to provide to that ambulance service, so that they can link their rosters to those particular courses and their applications to those particular courses. When adding courses attendees, it's important to add the correct attendee, because those folks need to be rostered on the ambulance service as well. If we have wrong attendees, then the wrong people are getting credit for attending your courses. And so the best way to add attendees to your courses is to utilize their EMS number. Those are unique. We oftentimes will get confusion because somebody has a common name like Smith or Johnson, and then the wrong person gets added into the course and somebody doesn't get credit for it. But their EMS number, their certification number is going to be unique, and that will help you make sure you get the right folks added to your courses. One thing that does happen rarely from time to time is we get a duplication in certification numbers. And if you ever come across that, just let us know and we can change those certification numbers so that everyone has a unique number. And finally, the last thing that you're going to need to do is make sure you add your course completion dates and an attendee pass-fail status. That not only connects with the attendees' applications, but also connects with the ambulance services application for course reimbursement. If someone doesn't successfully complete the course, they're not eligible for reimbursement for that course. So I'm going to throw it over to Holly here so she can talk a little bit about what your receipts need to include, what information you need to provide back to ambulance services so that they can successfully complete their applications.
All right, wonderful. Education programs will need to provide ambulance services several items so that they can properly select those course application requests for reimbursement, as Charlie had discussed. This application has now gone online. It used to be in a paper form. And so this is a sample of the receipt that we put now. It doesn't have to be identical to this, but we want to ensure that the ambulance services have all of the required information, including the course number, the course completion date, and the attendee's name. So I've just kind of broke that out here in some things that would be helpful for you to consider when giving ambulance services receipts for payment or invoices. There are several different types of renewal courses that are out there. And so giving you a few options, there's the full refresher, whether it be a 24-hour EMT refresher or the 40-hour NCCP course. This is how you enter it into the database and what you're putting it in as your course number. But please provide that course number. And Charlie, if you can kind of highlight that up here. Yep. The course number that you have, which is the year the course was taken, your education program number, and that unique 5 to 6 digit identifier for the course. So the ambulance service is going to select that from their online application in their roster for the courses. If you're using modules and you're entering, let's say the NCCP, for example, and you're entering, module A is 2 hours, module B is 2 hours, module C is 2 hours. You need to provide each of those course numbers because the ambulance service is going to need to select each of those course numbers if you're breaking it out that way, so that they can select those for reimbursement. If they don't select all of those and the receipt doesn't reflect the appropriate payment, then they would not be eligible to receive the full reimbursement amount. If you are an ambulance service that is attending this webinar and you are also an education program, you may invoice yourself for reimbursement if you're an approved education program, but you can only bill yourself for the actual costs incurred. So looking at what your program costs are for your program, the instructor time, the textbooks purchased for the students, any consumables purchased for the specific class. And you also need to substantiate those expenses and then divide them amongst how many people were in the course, essentially creating a de facto tuition cost. Then you can generate that invoice to yourself to show that per student amount and show how much costs were incurred. And then we would be able to pay that per student for any individual application or any of the individuals who meet the criteria. If you didn't incur any actual costs, there is nothing we can reimburse for. There is a very detailed process to reconcile the receipts and the course rosters. We are able to approve and deny applications accordingly. If the per student amount does not exceed the maximum amount, you can claim other costs that are eligible, maybe what you paid your students to attend, any mileage or per diems that you paid them to be there, but that must be proven with a paycheck stub. I'll toss that back over to Charlie.
All right. I'm just going to pause here for a second and see if we get any questions in the chat or Q&A yet. I do not see anything. All right. Okay. Let's move on then to a couple of reminders, kind of more in general here. So big reminder, we are no longer accepting education provided under the NCCP 2016 model. The NREMT released their new 2025 model this year, and now we are using that model going forward. So that means even if someone would have expired, if someone is in their grace period right now, even though they would have renewed, if they stayed on cycle and they had renewed, they would have used the 2016 model. Everybody is now renewing under the 2025 model. So whether or not they're in their grace period or they're expiring in the future, everybody is on the 2025 model. So please be advised when you're building out your courses to make sure that you're following the new hour breakdown that you can find on the NREMT website. EMS provider applications, we've streamlined that process, and all levels are currently using the same renewal application. Before, we had different applications for different levels. Everyone is now using the EMS provider renewal application from EMR all the way up to community paramedic. Grace periods. In the last legislative session, the legislature modified the grace period for EMRs from 1 year to 4 years. So they are now on the same grace period as EMTs, AEMTs, and paramedics. So all levels are now have that 4-year grace period after your expiration date to complete your renewal requirements and submit a reentry application. A caveat to that is there's still that reinstatement program for EMTs, AEMTs, and paramedics that was created last year. That program is good through December 31st, 2025, and that allows any EMT, AEMT, or paramedic that expired in the last 10 years to complete the refresher requirements and reinstate their credential for another 2 years. Anyone that wants to take advantage of that program, your application and your application must be received by our office, and your education must be completed by December 31st, 2025. That is when that program shuts down and expires. Applications received after that deadline or education completed after that deadline will not be eligible for the reinstatement program. And lastly, updates to Rule 4690-8300. That is the variance medication. So that is for basic life support ambulances. It is the rule that allows them to administer nebulizers or inhalers, glucagon, epinephrine, and nitroglycerin. That was updated to include some new routes for epinephrine and glucagon. So in addition to intramuscular injection, or subcutaneous injection. Epinephrine and glucagon can now also be administered intranasally if your medical director allows for that. The updated rule also allows BLS services to administer a beta agonist with or without an anticholinergic. So that would be like duonebs like albuterol with Atrovent or ipratropium bromide. That would be one option. So if you're a BLS service, or if they're coming to you for education on annual education on those variance medications, those new routes are now allowed. All right. Okay, that ends our updates. Real short, quick little update here. We'll pause and take any questions. I'm going to try to see if I can allow, maybe it'll be easier with a small group like this to allow folks to come off mute. So, all right, you can either type in the chat, use the Q&A interface, or if you feel you want to come off mute and you can just ask your question to the room.
Hey, Charlie, it's John. Just thanks for putting it together. And I know Holly and I have talked about it, but it's good that you got it out, and the recording will probably be helpful for other folks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. We appreciate the attendees. It's better than shouting to an empty room.
Why are you looking at me when you say empty room?
All right. Okay. It looks like we did a perfect job presenting the information and 100% comprehension. So thank you all for joining us. We'll let you get back to your afternoon. Have a good rest of your day.